In the dead of night, within the cold stone walls of a monastery, a war was being waged. Not with guns or armies, but a battle for a single man's soul. The sounds were so terrifying that fellow monks would press their ears to the door, listening to the blows, the screams, and the splintering of furniture, too afraid to enter. This wasn't a nightmare. This was the nightly reality for the man in cell number 5, Padre Pio. Before he was a world-famous saint, Francesco Forgione was a devout, yet sickly, young friar in the small Italian town of San Giovanni Rotondo. From a young age, he had experienced celestial visions. But where there is great light, shadows gather. The devil, whom Pio would call the Bluebeard or the Wretch, saw this young man's profound faith not as a virtue, but as a challenge, a threat to be extinguished. The attack started long before he became famous, in the solitude of his early priesthood. To understand the brutality of the fight, you must first understand the purity of the target. If you find the hidden corners of history and faith compelling, take a moment to subscribe. This story is a testament to a struggle few can even comprehend. It didn't begin with physical violence. The first incursions were subtle, designed to break his mind. He would be deep in prayer when the room would suddenly fill with obscene, blasphemous thoughts that were not his own. He would hear whispers in the dark, twisting his prayers into curses. Books would fly from his shelves. The ink in his pot would spill across letters he was writing to his spiritual director, as if an unseen hand had swatted it away. These were tests of his sanity, attempts to make him believe he was losing his mind, that God had abandoned him to madness. When psychological torment failed, the enemy began to take physical form. In his letters, Padre Pio described these horrifying visitations in chilling detail. Sometimes, it would appear as a huge, terrifying black cat. Other times, as a grotesque animal he couldn't recognize. To tempt his vow of chastity, the demon would manifest as a group of young, naked women, dancing provocatively in his Spartan cell. He would fight them off with prayer and by invoking the name of Jesus, but the apparitions were relentless and deeply disturbing. Perhaps the most insidious deception was when the devil would appear disguised as someone Pio trusted. He would take the form of his spiritual director, Father Agostino, or even his guardian angel. The impostor would offer him advice, encouraging him to be less severe in his penances, to be kinder to himself. It was a sweet poison, designed to lull him into a state of spiritual laziness. But Pio, through divine grace, could always sense the coldness, the lack of love in the apparition. He would test it by asking it to say, "Long live Jesus," and the moment he did, the disguise would melt away, revealing the hideous form of his tormentor before it vanished with a scream. When all other tactics failed, the attacks turned brutally physical. These were not symbolic struggles. They were beatings. The devil, in its most monstrous forms, would drag him from his bed, beat him, and thrash him with iron chains. He wrote in one letter, "He has been thrashing me since morning. He has thrown me out of bed and has even torn off my shirt." The objective was simple, to break his body so completely that his spirit would follow. He was left spat upon, bruised, and aching with pain that would last for days. The other friars were unwilling witnesses to this supernatural war. They couldn't see what was happening, but they could hear it. They reported hearing horrifying roars, hisses, and loud noises, as if the entire cell was being destroyed. Father Raffaelli, one of his fellow friars, testified that he often heard the sound of blows, as if a person were being beaten, followed by Pio's faint moans. When they would finally gather the courage to enter the room after the noises stopped, they would find Padre Pio lying on the floor, covered in bruises, his face swollen, sometimes spitting blood, The room itself would be in chaos, a testament to the violence that had just occurred. Pio was not left to fight alone. After these brutal battles, when he was at his lowest point, he would receive celestial comfort. He reported that Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and his guardian angel would frequently appear to him. They would heal his wounds and encourage him to persevere. His guardian angel was a constant companion, a protector who would offer him strength and sometimes even help him translate letters. It was this divine support that allowed him to endure what would have destroyed any other man. The darkness was terrifying, but the light was always more powerful. The question that hangs over all of this is, why? Why would God permit such a faithful servant to endure such horrific torment? From a theological perspective, this was not a punishment. It was a profound participation in what is known as redemptive suffering. Pio believed he was fighting these battles not just for himself, but for the souls of sinners. By enduring these demonic attacks, he was, in his view, taking on a burden to save others, to literally fight on the front lines of a spiritual war for humanity. His suffering had a purpose, a meaning that transcended his own pain. The devil's hatred for Padre Pio was not limited to the confines of his cell. There are numerous accounts from exorcists who, during the rite of exorcism, would hear the demon possessing a person cry out in torment at the mere mention of Padre Pio's name. In one famous case, an exorcist was struggling with a particularly stubborn demon. He invoked the names of many powerful saints to no avail. Finally, he commanded the demon to tell him which saint it feared the most. Through the mouth of the possessed person, the demon reportedly shrieked, "Padre Pio of Pietrelcina." It was a forced confession, a testament from the enemy itself to the power of the humble friar's faith. These nightly battles continued for decades. They were the secret, hidden cross he bore alongside the more famous, visible cross of the stigmata. The physical wounds on his hands, feet, and side were a public sign of his union with Christ's suffering. But the unseen wounds from his battles with the devil were perhaps even more profound. They forged his spirit into an unbreakable weapon of faith. He learned the enemy's tactics, his deceptions, and his weaknesses. He never surrendered, never gave in to despair. Padre Pio's life forces us to reconsider where the real wars are fought. It's not always on some grand, cinematic battlefield with banners flying and armies clashing. No, his story shows that the greatest battles, the ones that truly define us, are often fought in the smallest rooms, in the deafening silence of our own hearts. His cell, number 5, was more than just a place to sleep. It was an arena, a microcosm of the universal struggle between good and evil, between crippling doubt and fragile faith, between soul-crushing despair and a stubborn flicker of hope. Imagine that tiny, Spartan room. 4 bare walls, a hard cot, the cold seeping up from the stone floor. Within that claustrophobic space, the entire drama of the human condition played out night after night. These weren't just abstract ideas for him. They were living, breathing forces warring for control. And in that arena, he proved something vital. He showed that even when you're facing the most terrifying, suffocating darkness imaginable, a darkness that wants to swallow you whole, a single soul, armed with unshakable faith, can stand firm. It's not about being fearless. It's about being terrified and holding on anyway. To stand your ground when every instinct screams to run. That's victory. He emerged from those nights, bruised and exhausted, but not broken. He proved that faith isn't the absence of doubt, but the courage to act in spite of it. The war in cell number 5 ended when he took his last breath. The fighting stopped. But the story of his courage, that didn't end. It escaped those monastery walls and continues to inspire millions of people who are fighting their own quiet wars, in their own small rooms. So this leaves us with the ultimate question. What do you believe truly happened within those walls? Was it a literal, physical war with the devil, as so many eyewitnesses and fellow friars claimed? Was he being physically thrown against the stone, his screams echoing in the halls? Or was this a profound, internal struggle against the ultimate darkness, a psychological agony so intense it felt completely, terrifyingly real? A battle of the mind that manifested in the physical world. And maybe, just maybe, the distinction doesn't even matter. Maybe a spiritual war is the most physical war a person can ever fight. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.